Welcome to Business Success Tips, where you learn to make more money in less time and have a lot more fun. My guest today is Jeff Morgan, owner of Green Square Construction. And now, Jeff, tell them about Green Square and how you got started and your background and why they should listen to you.
Yeah, I started as an architect about 25 years ago. Practiced architecture for several years, doing large corporate architecture. Decided to venture out on my own. Had a minor in furniture design and woodworking, and so started doing custom woodworking. After several years of doing that kind of led to some remodeling work. I also started buying rental properties and fixing them up for myself, and just learning a lot that way. Kind of grew up in a builder family, had several uncles that were contractors. My grandfather was a contractor, so guess I had it in the blood. So kind of got into the remodeling through that. And after several years of remodeling, that kind of grew and grew, and the projects got bigger and bigger until we started building new homes. And then that was probably about 12 years ago, we built our first new home, and we've been building new and doing large scale remodeling ever since.
And where are you located, Jeff?
We're in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay. And that's Indianapolis Metro, right? I'm like you're in the city.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so I guess a couple of things. What advice would you give to contractors who are in the remodeling business and considering going into the either new homes or custom homes or spec homes? Does it make sense to do that, or is it a totally different business?
It is a very different business. We kind of tried to straddle both sides for several years. We were still doing the smaller remodeling projects, and we were building new homes. And it was really challenging to manage both because it's a completely different style of construction, is what I learned. And there came a point after a couple of years of probably not doing the best job at either, where we were trying to do both, that I realized I've got to make a choice and focus on either the new construction and the big projects, or stick with the smaller remodeling projects. And we had a lot of new homes going at the time, so I decided to focus on that. It's a very different management style. I would have liked to kept both going, but it requires a completely separate set of staff to do the smaller scale remodeling projects effectively. I feel like you've got to keep a lot of the labor in-house, and you've got to have a controllable team that you know and trust. If they can do things, that they can be in front of homeowners, they can be in somebody's house where they're living in it. Whereas with new construction and then the kind of big, 6 and 7 figure remodel and addition projects that we do, it's a whole different animal, where you're working mostly with subcontractors. The homeowner's not living in the house. It's a different style of management, and to do both, you would have to pretty much have two completely separate teams within the same company.
Well, so you're a guy that made a decision. Do you regret that decision, or are you happy you made that decision? I mean, how do you feel about it in retrospect?
No, I don't regret the decision. I am glad that I retained the larger remodel work. That was something that kind of came out of that as the remodeling grew, from like kitchens and baths to additions and whole house remodels, and then into new construction. When we made that shift to really focus more on the new construction and larger projects, I held on to that larger piece of the remodeling side. And for several years there, we were only doing 1 or 2 of those a year, and we were building, 8 to 10 houses a year, maybe 12 houses a year. And now, as interest rates have gone up, I've really been glad we kept our hand in that, because my number of new homes has gone down a little bit, but my number of remodels has shot up, and I can't even get to all of the big remodel projects right now. So it's helped us continue to grow through this time where I know other builders have been slowing down a little bit.
Now, one of the questions that always comes up for me as a coach sometimes is, Well, I was making 40% gross profit on remodels, and now I'm making 20% on a new house. Is that bad or good? How did you deal with that change in gross margins?
So I think a lot of that comes down to what you're keeping above the line and below the line. And I think a lot of remodelers that say they're making 40%, they're putting a lot of stuff below the line that I would say should be put above the line, like project management, superintendents, even trucks and vehicles and stuff like that. I actually usually charge 18 to 19% gross on new construction. I usually charge 20 to 22% on remodels. So I do charge a little bit more on the remodels, just because of some of the increased uncertainty with them. But I'm billing all of pretty much everybody that works for me, except for myself and my bookkeeper, is getting billed to the project. So
Okay.
yes, there's more management of a remodel project. Yes, there's more complexity, but if you're billing correctly, we do cost plus everything. And if I'm billing all my management costs to the project, then my overhead's the same, whether it's remodel or not, if I'm putting everything above the line that should be above the line.
So some people would call it 40%, but since they're putting a lot of that below the line, you're making the same amount of money just because you're throwing it all in Division 1 or above the line, right?
Yeah, I think the net's going to be the same either way. It's just
Okay.
calling it something different.
Now, one issue that always comes up for people in this industry is, how do I get my leads? Do I, use SEO? Do I talk to architects? There's a lot of various methods for getting leads. I'd like to know what's worked for you. Maybe give some advice to the builders listening to this.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest part of our continued growth and success has been taking care of people first. Number one is just having good customer relationships. We try to be as selective as possible with who we work with. That doesn't mean we just turn people down all the time, but we do turn clients down occasionally that don't feel like a good fit for us. Because if you can't get along with them, nobody's going to have a good experience, us or
Right.
the homeowner. And just continue to take care of them, having open and honest communication. We don't try to hide anything. We show everybody all their financials, and we explain to them what we make and why we charge what we charge, and they seem to get it. And when we get to the end of the project, a lot of my clients have become my friends, and I hang out with some of them, because we get to know each other really well. And those are the people that tell everybody else about you. That's the number one best business builder right there. Beyond that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do on the internet and social media and stuff like that. We have gotten some projects through that. We do all that. We keep up with our website. We do some SEO. We do Google AdWords. We do social media. I find a lot of that becomes validation for people that already tend to know about us one way or another, and they might not know us personally, so they go online to figure out who we are, and they see all that stuff. And they're like, oh, these guys are a legit active company. So I think there's value in doing all of that there. Number one, if you're just doing it to drive leads and that's your only source of leads, I think you might struggle.
So of the leads you got last year, where do they come from?
I would say 80 to 90% of them are relationship driven. Sometimes they're people we've worked with. Sometimes they're, I've built a lot of contacts with realtors. I'm pretty involved with the real estate market here in Indianapolis. So I do get a fair number of referrals from realtors, most of which I don't have to pay for because they just get to know me as friends, and they're looking for somebody to send somebody to because they don't have options. Some of those are business contacts. Some of them are builders association contacts. I'm on the board of our builders association here, and I've created a lot of relationships through that and gotten to know a lot of people in and around the industry, but all those people in and around the industry know people that are always looking for something. And if you're the guy that's always there and that they know is trustworthy, then they send them to you.
You ever get work from architects or designers or anybody like that?
A little bit, occasionally, yes. We have started taking work to architects. For years. We kept architecture in-house and did our own design work. With my background in architecture, I like to control that. And so we didn't get a lot of that because of that, I think. But we have started to change that a little bit and reach out to other architects for certain projects and try to build those relationships. So I think that could come. That hasn't been a huge driver of business for us yet, but we're still kind of in the process of building those relationships.
So if you met a guy who's a remodeling company and, you know, he's doing a couple of million or something, and you met him in an airport, you only had like a 10-minute conversation with the guy or lady, and they'd say, well, you're a successful guy. What advice would you give him? What would you say? Look at, if you're going to do 2 or 3 things, just remember this, and it'll guide you fairly through growing your company. What would those things be?
You got to learn the business side of your business. There's a lot of guys that are good builders, good remodelers. They know how to build stuff, but they don't know how to run a business. And that's, if you want to last and if you want to make money, you got to understand your business. You got to understand your numbers, and you got to know what you're looking at, and you got to know how to price things correctly, and you got to know whether you made money at the end of the day. I went through that process, probably like a lot of guys, somewhat painfully when I first got into this, and I focused all my attention on being the best builder that I could be. And I learned all the latest building techniques. I learned all kinds of stuff about green building. That's always been a high efficiency building, has always been a focus of ours and a personal passion of mine. And we got really good at that. We did multiple LEED Platinum projects. We got several awards through some of that stuff for some of our construction. But we were doing these big projects, and I was looking at things at the end of the day, and I was having trouble cashing my paycheck. Like all my employees, I'd be able to I'd have enough money in the account for my employees to cash their checks, but not for me to cash mine. So
right.
Yeah, and at one point, I remember I had a stack of probably 6 or 7 biweekly paychecks laying on my desk that I hadn't cashed. I hadn't gotten paid in 2 months, and I was like, "What am I doing? This is
right.
We're doing several $1 million a year, and can't cash my paycheck." And so I decided to shift my focus at that point from studying construction to studying business, and that has made a huge difference over the years. And
how did you study business? Did you get advice? Did you read books? Did you listen to podcasts? How did you learn what you needed to know about business and construction?
I did all those things. I just started devouring anything I could find. I started with books. That was, the first and easiest thing was just got on Amazon, looked up books on business, looked up books on construction business, anything I could search and find that seemed relatable to me, I just started reading it. One thing that made actually a big difference for me was I joined a Builder 20 club through NAHB and got in a group of other builders that were similar in product, but all around the country. And I've learned just a wealth of stuff from those guys, and they've become very close friends. I've been in that group for, I don't know, probably 8 years now.
Wow.
And constantly learn from those guys, and we we meet twice a year at one of our locations, but we email each other constantly. We ask each other questions constantly. Anytime one of us is facing a challenge, we just shoot out an email to the group, and somebody's been through it before and can help you out. And that's been massive.
So peer group. So education, peer group. Any other advice that you've gotten from other areas, or is that where you got most of your stuff?
don't be afraid to talk to other builders, even locally. Like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, they won't help me. They won't tell me anything. They're one of my competitors. But I've actually learned a lot from other builders right here in my own city that are my competitors technically. But they're good guys and they understand that there's more than enough business to go around and that none of us can do it all. And they really have been pretty cool about it. So if you can find those guys that can be a local mentor, or even just a sounding board. I've got one guy he's actually younger than me, but he runs a really good business and we bounce ideas off of each other all the time. If one of us is struggling with the subcontractor and needs somebody else, we say, we text each other, hey, do you have a painter that might work for me? Because mine's struggling, or, whatever it may be. And those guys have been a huge resource as well. And I've talked to guys, even some of my Builder 20 guys in other cities and stuff, and they're like, I've never talked to another builder. They don't seem like they want it. And I'm like, just try. You never know. Maybe they'll say no, but if they say yes, take them out for lunch. What's it going to hurt?
Right. It sounds like you get a lot of advice for a lunch for sure, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's a great place. I mean, it's not something you're going to learn in college. That's what I realized. It's like you could go get a business degree, but it's not going to help you run a construction business.
No, it's not. So what would you say, you've been in this business for a long time, if you had to pick, two or mistakes you've made that you go, boy, I'd never do that again. What comes to mind as far as things you would do differently?
That's a good question. Being afraid to hire and fire, I would say, is one that's probably held me back somewhat. I've always felt obligated when I hire someone to provide for them. I take it very seriously that I'm providing for them and their family, and that's made it hard for me to probably let people go when I should have let them go and let them hang on for too long, because I feel an obligation to them. And I've had to learn, and I have learned a few times that they're actually better off afterwards, because it may not, if it's not the right fit for me, it's probably not the right fit for them either.
Like the world's worst employee, who's not bad enough to fire, good enough to keep, right? They kill an organization.
Yeah, I learned that from you, and I've taken that to heart several times, and it's helped me in the last couple of years, since you first told me that.
Right, cool.
Yeah, so, and then also being afraid to hire because of that. Like, I don't know if I want to take the risk on this person, because it might not work out or whatever. And I think I should just be more aggressive at hiring and probably more aggressive at firing, when it feels right, so that you can build the team that you need. Because without a good team, you got nothing.
But you're only as good as your team, right? And your ability to build a team is one of your key factors in succeeding, I would think, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. And
Good
then,
teams.
So hiring, firing, and maybe handing people along. Are there any other things, like any other clients you shouldn't have taken on? You knew it when you met them, but you took them on anyway. Have you ever had that issue?
For sure, yeah. That's something we've also learned the hard way a few times. There are ones that'll sneak through that you think are cool, and then they become your worst nightmare. But even those, you learn some lessons. There's some telltale signs there that you learn to pick up on.
What are some of the telltale signs, just for the people listening to this?
How they treat other people, how they treat people that work for you or your subcontractors, or even, there's been, like they'll be, we do a pre-construction agreement. So we have some time to spend with a client before we're actually building the house. And they might be really nice to me because they want me to build their house. But my staff starts working with them during that pre-construction agreement, and they might be kind of snippy or short with some of my staff that's just trying to help them. And that's one of those like kind of red flag things, because it's like, if you're getting snippy and we haven't even started building anything yet, usually I find those kinds of attitudes and personalities become magnified once we get into construction, and once there's a lot more money on the table, and once they're wanting to move in, and the timelines, getting tight, that's when what might be a minor nuisance at the beginning becomes a real problem towards the end.
Well, then, how do you, Jeff, how do you get rid of that person? Let's say you're starting a pre-construction agreement and you're going, oh my God, like they treat your staff terribly. They may treat, everybody in general terribly. They're just not a nice person. And I mean, it could be the way they treat a waiter. It doesn't even have to be your staff, right? Just
Yeah.
sort of the kind of person they are.
Mhm.
And so you get, this is not somebody I want to spend the next 6 months with. How do you get rid of them once you sign a pre-construction agreement?
So that can be delicate. The thing you have, the big weapon in your back pocket is pricing. So you can put a PETA factor on it, and you can make it so that they either want to walk away, or if they don't, you're making enough money to be worth the investment.
I see. So you jack the price up so high that they probably won't take it. And if they do, then it might be worth dealing with their difficulties, right?
Yeah, exactly. You tell your team, look, this person might suck, but we're making a bunch of money off of them, and you do something nice for your team with it.
And just deal with that person. Cool. So if you were gonna like sum up, this is a one piece of advice that I would give the people listening to this podcast. You're a successful contractor, been successful for a long time. What would you say to the people listening to this? If you can only remember one thing, the most important thing about being a successful contractor is, what would that be for you?
That being a contractor is a business, and it's not that unique compared to other businesses. Business is business for the most part. Everybody's got a unique product, but learn how to run your business, because you'll never have any peace or relief or success if you don't learn to run your business.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate your advice. And just for the heck of it, let's say people listening want to talk to you and get a little feedback. If they give you a call and say, hey, can they talk to you?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. How would they reach you, Jeff?
They can call our office at 317-431-8056, or they can email me at jeff@greensquareinc.com.
Or they can go to your website, what's your website?
Greensquareinc.com.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate being here. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Good to chat with you.